Hello, this is the third podcast for the online theory course, and today I'm going to do a few things. First, I'm going to talk about the reading a little bit. Some of you have suggested that I discuss a few of the main points each week in the podcast, so I'll try and do that today with the Bentham reading. Next week, I'll talk about the reading on biological determinism. I'm not going to summarize the reading for you because I don't want to discourage you from reading it yourselves, and it's important that you do. But I'll point to some things that I think are particularly important. Then I'll talk about a way to kind of approach these theories and your discussion questions to give you another strategy for doing that. And then I'll just talk about some course issues, discussion posts, visuals that are due next week. So to jump into the reading, there's not a lot to say about Bentham's conceptualization of deterrence that we can't say about Beccaria. Bentham is a utilitarian theorist, just like Beccaria, but just like Beccaria, he focuses on pains and pleasures and the relationship between those, and he argues that people will calculate and be motivated by avoiding pains and seeking out pleasure. He also identifies that you can deprive someone of pleasure as a means of punishment as well. So this is kind of connected to what I'm going to discuss with a way to look at these series. But what he does is he really operationalizes, and I'll explain what that term means. But he operationalizes these concepts of pains and pleasures in much more detail than Beccaria does. He still doesn't get to the point where he's creating variables that can be tested like a modern deterrence or rational choice theorist would, but he takes a step forward. And he actually, Bentham likes to list things out. He lists a lot of different types of crimes, types of punishment, and he links the two together. And he also lists out a lot of these pains and pleasures. And it's kind of fun to look at them and see, what is the modern equivalent? Are people still motivated by these things? Do you kind of buy into what he's arguing? So I encourage you to kind of hone in on those aspects of Bentham when you look at that. So I mentioned this term operationalization or operationalizing variables. And this is another way to kind of approach these theories and write your discussion questions. You'll remember one kind of strategy I gave you was to look at whether or not these theories kind of meet the standard of what we would call a good theory. So are they testable? Are they logical? Those sorts of things that you've been talking about in your discussion posts. This is another way to do it. When we think theoretically, we often start with ideas, which are broad, kind of oftentimes vague, and then we go from an idea to a concept. So we start to conceptualize. So we go from, I'm thinking about why is it that kids get into trouble? So I just have this vague idea. And then I move into, okay, I'm going to conceptualize that into age. And then I operationalize age. So what do I mean by age? Operationalize means you take a concept and you make it into something operational. In other words, that you can operate with or on. So you can use it to test something. And then that's when you come up with you have these variables that are created by concepts, and then you operationalize those variables and you start to look at their relationships. And theories are all about relationships. So Bentham is theorizing that there's a relationship between pain and pleasure and the calculus people make about whether or not to commit crime. And that this is how deterrence functions. So think about ideas, concepts, their relationships, and how that creates theories. So when you write these discussion questions and read about these theories, think about, okay, what are the concepts? What ideas did they stem from, and how are they operationalized? What are the relationships that are being proposed, if any? If there aren't any, perhaps that's a sign that it's not um, necessarily a theory as such. So you can talk about that in your discussion questions. So think about that. I mean, this course is about learning the theories, but like I said, it's also about learning to be a theorist and thinking abstractly and making those connections. So I want you to be critical of these theories when you do the discussion questions. Speaking of which, I've seen a lot that have been posted. I know a few of you, maybe a dozen of you, had some problems. You weren't added to a discussion board because you were enrolled later in the class. I think I've addressed that. So you should all have access to the discussion boards now. And I think that the posts have been pretty solid up to this point. But again, I want to challenge you to be more and more critical and think more and more like a theorist, more abstractly as you write these discussion questions. The next time, remember, you'll also you'll reply to a question. So the visual. Again, I want to reiterate that creativity is the key here. I do want you to demonstrate that you understand the theory, but I want you to be creative in doing so. The more creative, the better you'll be able to demonstrate that understanding. I don't want to see something that's just really straightforward and like a list, a list of types of deterrence and a list of the crimes they're supposed to deter. I want you to think a little bit more abstractly than that. In terms of submitting these, you just simply go into the assignment link and you attach it to your submission. When you get the grade back, it'll be in a rubric format, like just like the discussions. Make sure that you check to see that you can access the assignment links before the day of, because just like with the discussions, especially since it's a weekend, there's no guarantee that myself or the TA will be on Blackboard checking emails the day of. So you need to make sure you can do this beforehand. And a few people have asked the question, can we just take an image from the internet that represents the theory? You can take images from the internet or from clip art databases or whatever and combine them, but it has to be an original creation. So if you're not artistic, you can certainly use images from elsewhere, but I want you to combine them in a way that's original, that you created. So I don't have a problem either way. If you want to create original art or if you want to use other people's in an innovative way that you're combining it, that's fine. And then one last reminder, the readings, the reading for next week, you'll notice obviously there's not a link in the syllabus for that, but it's in the readings folder. So again, I think most of you at this point have kind of explored Blackboard and everything that's there in terms of this course. But if you haven't, go through all the folders, look at all the resources available to you, and I think that'll help you out in the long run. So I look forward to seeing more discussions. I look forward to seeing your visuals next week. And I look forward to seeing some of you if and when you stop in for office hours. So have a good weekend, and I'll talk to you next week.